Hi.
And today's guest, Denis Loubet.
Hi.
Hi, fellas. Today's opening music was The Bells Are Ringing by They Might Be Giants. A quite excellent criticism of religion and parody of Christmas music, in my opinion. Happy solstice, everyone. This is that time of year. And we are live December 20, 2003. Okay. Jeez. And now it's showtime.
Yeah.
Any instances of slurs, defamation, or discrimination against atheists or other non-believers in the U.S. media should be reported to the National Atheist Ombuds by emailing ombuds@atheism.org. Basically what they do is, get us organized so that we can respond to, those habitual, repeated, no atheists in foxholes, insults, and all that kind of stuff. So when you email this stuff to the ombuds, tell them what you heard, where you heard it, and they will let local organizations know so they can scream and yell in the press.
These days, you'd expect them to be flooded.
It is a target-rich environment out there. You can collect past episodes of The Non-Prophets and also an audio version of our sister show, The Atheist Experience, which airs on public access television only in Austin, Texas, in a convenient CD format. Each CD includes a month's worth of audio from both shows in QuickTime and MP3, plus extra surprises. The CDs are $5 each. Now, isn't Ashley talking about changing that to, quarterly or something? Did he say something?
Sorry, I wasn't listening.
Nobody knows? Okay. There may be changes, and if there aren't, in the new year, then we'll let you know.
Yes, he was going to change it to one DVD-ROM to come out quarterly.
Quarterly DVD-ROMs?
Huh.
Okay. I bet the price will change, too. Okay. Let's talk about news, shall we? Who wants to begin? Russell, why don't you begin? Or are you too busy?
I should never do the first story.
All right, I'll do the first story. This is wrapping up some news that we brought to you earlier this year. In Austin, here in Austin, Texas, a church pastor was sentenced to 26 years in prison Friday for severely beating a Bible study student with a tree branch after that child misbehaved during a summer class. The pastor's twin brother received a 14-year sentence for his role in the beating. Justice was served, said the prosecutor. Pastor Joshua Thompson, 23, who ministered to the Spanish-speaking congregation at the fundamentalist Capital City Baptist Church in Austin, was ordered to serve 26 years for injury to a child and 20 years for aggravated assault.
Yay. All right.
Yeah. His twin brother, Caleb.
Nice biblical name.
Yeah.
Joshua and Caleb, the identical twins. That's not too creepy. Sentenced to 14 years for basically holding the kid down while the other twin beat him.
Surprised they didn't use the jaw of an ass.
The sentence will run concurrently. They will both be eligible for parole after they serve half their sentences. Okay, so anyway, there's that. Any comments on the beating of children in churches by church people?
I'm against it.
I'm against it.
Really? Nobody leaping to the defense of these jagoffs?
Not all. No.
Here's some more excruciating details. Louis, this is the victim, and a doctor who treated him said he was hit at least 100 times. During the trial, jurors saw graphic photos of the boy's back with bruises and blood and scrapes and puncture wounds.
How is Louis doing now? Sorry, you weren't prepared for that one.
I'm checking the. He's now 12. He spent a week in intensive care, faced possible kidney failure, and needed a blood transfusion. He's apparently pulled through. The brothers.
I hope the parents are getting greatly reimbursed by that.
I don't see anything in here about a civil suit getting cash out of these guys or out of the church.
I'm wondering why.
This is the criminal trial. There might.
There may be another one.
That there might be a civil trial to try to get compensation.
I hope so.
I was wondering why a Spanish-speaking congregation would be going to a Baptist fundamentalist place of worship rather than, say, the Catholic Church.
I don't know. Probably so their children wouldn't be abused.
Good idea.
Didn't work.
No!
Use them in a different way.
Rats.
The brothers admitted to the beating, but disputed its intensity.
How many
It's like
times?
it would have been better. Like it would have been okay if they'd only hit him,
Right.
10 times.
How many times was the Jesus
98
character lashed?
times would have been all right.
I don't know. Does it say in the Bible how many times they hit Jesus?
Don't know.
I can't remember. I don't think it was
Why?
100.
Why is that relevant? You're saying this kid suffered more being held down by
Joshua,
These assholes? Yeah, you
Caleb
bet.
while Joshua beat him?
Yeah.
But he didn't die for our sins, so there.
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, I guess.
Why are you guys making fun of the kid? The kid's not.
I'm not making fun of the kid.
No.
I saw his back on the news. It's just covered in one big bruise.
Joshua Thompson said that Louis' parents had given them permission to punish the boy, and that he didn't intend to inflict serious injuries. No, just beat on him with a tree branch 100 times.
Well, the kid should be grateful that God didn't summon the bears.
That's right. We're just doing, he didn't behave during his Bible study. God once sent bears to kill multiple children for making fun of a bald prophet.
That's right.
So, really, it's that...
The kid got off light. I'm sure they thought.
It's that whole, matter of degree issue that we talked about on the last show.
Yeah.
This is just one child. God, flooded, tens of thousands of children in flood. This is like nothing. What's the big deal?
I had also heard that the boy's father, the head priest there, was having some kind of conflict with the parents about what, I'm not sure. And so...
The boy's father was having a conflict with the parents?
The parents of the boy who got beaten.
Yes.
Apparently, they were having some kind of conflict. The boy's parents.
I still understand who we're talking about.
The boy's parents who...
The boy's parents, yes. Yeah. And then who's the father?
The pastor of the church.
Oh, that father. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Apparently, they were having some sort of disagreement.
Uh-huh.
And it was put forth that maybe the beating was in retribution for that conflict.
Ooh. Wow, well,
that would be really bad.
That's interesting. There's nothing about it in this news story.
Okay.
Not in my copy. Did you get a different version of this?
No, that's just, one of the times that I saw it on the news, they mentioned that.
Yeah, well...
So I don't actually have that in front of me.
One doesn't know.
Who knows?
But that's a risk you take when you let, fundamentalist weirdos
have access to your children.
Yeah. Okay. Kyle, do you have a story you would like to read?
Yes. Excuse me.
And what is that, water?
Water.
Can I get one of those?
Oh, sure.
This is from Channelview, Texas.
Were we going to do the which ones after the religious liberty one, though?
Okay.
Yeah, do a different one.
Do a different one. Here's the one out of Kansas. The headline is Commandments Question Startles Judgeship Applicants. A member of a panel interviewing applicants for a judgeship in eastern Kansas asked candidates if they believed in the Ten Commandments, surprising several lawyers who applied for the job.
Believe in them? I've seen them.
That's right. What?
They're right up there on the wall. Quote, I was a little taken aback. Lawyer Darrell Smith said, it's my understanding that the Bill of Rights prohibits a religious test for an office of public trust. Which is, yes, that's the case. Panel member Robert Harrington asked about the Ten Commandments and posed other yes or no questions. For instance, do you believe in abortion? Do you believe in capital punishment? Both of those seem to me to be thinly veiled religious test.
Yeah, believe it. That's irrelevant. The judge apply. What he should believe in is if a fair and impartial application of the law, whatever the law happens to be.
And couldn't they phrase their questions a little more technically? I mean, my gosh. Do you believe in this? Well, yes, I've heard of abortion, so I believe, I believe it occurs. What do you want me to say? Do you agree with this? Do you agree with that?
So these were judgeship candidates. I thought judges were elected.
These apparently not.
Very special judges.
They let's see. 2 were chosen, and the governor Kathleen Sebelius is expected to make a final decision on December 24th. Although Kansas law states no religious test or property qualification shall be required for any office of public trust, Harrington, the judge who asked the question, said his question about the Ten Commandments was appropriate.
In what sense? What do you mean appropriate?
Well, I'll tell you.
Oh, he explains why.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, boy, this should be good.
The oath of office for district judge includes, "So help me God," Harrington said. So why wouldn't the Ten Commandments be an appropriate question? Because we
got away with violating the Constitution already. Now it's anything goes.
It's basically a case of...
I thought the whole reason why that God stuff can stay in the law is because it doesn't mean anything with respect to a particular religion or God.
Basically, it's two wrongs make something appropriate.
You mean they're using the God as leverage to say that it's the God of Christianity? I'm shocked.
Let's see.
So help my God.
Edward Biggis, an attorney who practices...
No, go there.
He practices in Johnson County.
What was his last name?
Richardus.
Well, he disagreed.
He disagreed that it was appropriate.
Right. He said, "It shouldn't come up in any job interview. I learned that in business law when I was an undergrad." Harrington also defended his other questions.
Must have slept through that class.
"I was asking the questions to see how they would react to difficult questions," Harrington said. "They'll have to make hard decisions, and if they can answer hard questions, that's fine. But if they have to make an explanation for their answer, that's different."
If they have to make an explanation? What?
Right. Apparently, he's
looking for judges that can just blurt out yes or no without explaining themselves?
Right. He doesn't want opinions. He wants statements of...
Yeah. So how did they answer? Doesn't say, does it?
Doesn't say.
And it doesn't say how the ones that were ultimately selected, which I think would be more revealing.
Let's see.
Well, the guy who said he was taken aback, was he selected?
No. He is not one of the two that were selected.
Well, somebody's got to lose, but yeah.
Well, yeah, but... All right, interesting. Russell, are you prepared yet, or shall I jump into another one?
Yeah, I'm prepared.
Okay.
Something going on in France now, which you would think would be, we would favor, but I don't think we do. Chirac orders law banning headscarves. Despite protests from Muslim leaders, France must outlaw Islamic head coverings, Jewish skull caps, and other obvious religious signs in schools and regulate them in the workplace. President Jacques Chirac announced on Wednesday. Such action, the French president said in a televised national address, is needed to reaffirm France's secular foundations. It is not negotiable, he asserted. Islamic headscarves, Jewish yarmulkes, or outsized Christian crosses have no place in public schools, Chirac said, and called on Parliament, where his conservative government has a majority, to pass a law banning them ahead of the school year that starts in September 2004.
Outsized?
How big is that?
Crosses? Good. So, little crosses are okay? Are little yarmulkes okay?
I don't know.
Little headscarves?
I'm thinking just big gag crosses, one of those big plastic costume
But clearly
things.
there are some crosses that he is saying are okay.
Yeah.
Right? But I don't hear that little headscarves or little yarmulkes are okay.
Well, if they were little, they wouldn't actually cover the head.
The whole idea is crazy.
And what about regular scarves?
Well, if they're little crosses, then they're not going to ward off vampires either, but clearly that doesn't matter.
They'll ward off little
bitty vampires.
Just little teeny ones.
Midget vampires.
Like the little girl vampire in Interview,
yeah. Well, you may be wondering what the reason of this is specifically.
Do you think?
Part of a quickening government effort to thwart the rise of Islamic fundamentalism. Apparently if you don't let women wear the headscarves, then they won't become fundamentalists.
Because we all go to your frickin' schools. They're not wearing it unless they're a fundamentalist already. It's not like, wearing a headscarf leads to stronger stuff. No.
The slippery slope.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
First scarves, then
now
burqas.
I frequently mention the law they have in France.
Their religion says that they should. I mean, their religion says that they shouldn't expose their head anywhere. That it's shameful. It would be like walking around with their bare breasts, which I'm in favor of. But
but but
not in favor of forcing people to do.
No, that's crazy.
Yeah, all that they're going to do is they're going to further widen the rift between. Now, do they even have public schools in France?
Yes.
That's then my next question. Because if they don't have public schools, then the government might actually be in a position to force these people to violate their religious, traditions.
I don't see how that follows.
Because if you have to go to public school and there's no option, then you'd have to take off your yarmulke or whatever.
But there's going to be no option anyway because you're saying
private schools?
Yeah. Are you saying it would be okay if there were only private schools and he was telling all
I don't
private
know
schools?
what it is that I'm saying that you're listening to, Russell. I'll start again. I'm saying outlawing the wearing of this religious garb in public schools could conceivably actually force people to violate their religious laws if, in fact, their children are forced to go to public schools because there's no option. That's why I'm asking if there's an option. If there's an option, then these people are just going to not go to public schools. They'll go to private schools.
Don't know, but it's
all they'll do is further widen the rift.
It's just, it's not just schools. He says he can regulate them in the workplace, too.
Yikes.
In the workplace.
He's just asking.
Not just government workplaces, but any workplaces?
Looks like any workplace.
I guess I have a problem with that.
It mentions that that he's banning large crosses and yarmulkes and headscarves, but it also says specifically that this is trying to undercut Islamic fundamentalism. So I guess it goes something like, Muslims are scary, so we should get rid of, we should not allow them to do the outward things that make them identify them to each other. I guess it would be like
bullshit. They'll just come up with secret handshakes. I mean, how is that going to stop anything?
It's just going to inflame it.
It is on its surface. It looks vaguely like what's going on in the U.S., where we're cracking down on religious symbolism on public grounds, and then that is being driven in part or helped along in part, depending on how you look at it, by people like weird cultists saying, well, you got to put our bizarre, what's the Ra worshipping guys in Utah, right? Can't remember the name. But them coming in and say, well, if you're going to put up the Ten Commandments, you have to put up our religious edicts too, and then finally, even some fundamentalists start getting the message that if we allow this, then it's anything goes.
Right.
But
there's
the difference
a big distinction here.
Yeah, there's a big distinction. The distinction is in the U.S. we're talking about limiting this kind of expression only on public grounds, right? Only on public land.
Well, more than that, we're not letting the public schools, which are state-run, push or promote the Christianity message themselves.
But even in our public schools, we're not saying, in most cases,
right.
But we've had weird, obscure cases where, some girl comes in with her anarchy symbol or a occult pentagram amulet or something, and she's sent home and told that she can't wear that, but that is private expression by individuals. We don't stop people when they start walking on the Capitol grounds and say, kindly remove all your religious paraphernalia, right?
Individuals actually have an extremely large amount of freedom there.
Right. What we're trying to stop here in the U.S. is governments forcing religion on people, not individuals having religious beliefs.
Right.
Unfortunately, the fundamentalists are already latching on to this, what's going on in France.
I'm sure they are.
And claiming that that's where those of us in the U.S. who care about separating church and state want to go, which is not true. And so
we're for them, and we don't.
France is the country that enforces its language, right? It has this official language.
Well, there's something else here. Chirac said secularism, France's cherished separation of religion and state, remains a cornerstone of French values, providing neutral ground for different religions to coexist in harmony, as long as they don't express themselves. He rejected the Anglo-Saxon model of integration, admired by some French Muslims, where ethnic communities guard their customs and separateness. I refuse to let France take that path. It would sacrifice its heritage, it would compromise its future, it would lose its soul.
That's the same kind of argument that the fundamentalists are using in the U.S., claiming that all those things will be lost and sacrificed if we don't have big Christian displays associated with our government.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Same kind of argument. It's no better if you claim that it's that you have to have imposed secularism than it is if you have to have imposed theism.
Right, which is exactly why our Constitution equally says that the government cannot promote religion and cannot inhibit religion.
Right.
That's a good thing.
Right. Thanks, Jacques.
Yeah.
This might be a good time for you, Kyle, to read your essay that you brought in about strong atheism versus weak atheism, because we're talking now about... we're in the territory of what are reasonable stances to take. And we're just shifting from politics to philosophy now, right?
Okay.
This might be a good segue.
Sure.
But go ahead.
Very well. All right. There are two kinds of atheism: weak atheism and strong atheism. Due to the lack of any hard evidence supporting the existence of any deities, the weak atheist believes in no gods. This kind of atheist, however, stops short of asserting that there are definitely no gods. This is considered the safer position intellectually because the atheist is not required to prove the non-existence of any gods, which we can't do. Conversely, the strong atheist not only doesn't believe in any gods, he asserts that there are definitely no gods in which to believe. This is considered the less tenable position because the strong atheist is required to prove a negative, namely that there are absolutely no gods. I hope to show that while the strong atheist position is perhaps less intellectually rigorous, it still can be a valid position for an atheist to hold. Let me first define my terms. What I mean by God is any supernatural entity that concerns itself with the affairs of humans and or has a hand in the functioning of the universe. In other words, I'm talking about your everyday garden-variety god like Thor, Zeus, Yahweh, Shiva, etc. I can see that there are people who consider the sun a god and choose to worship it. Likewise, there are folks who consider the village totem pole a god and who worship it. Clearly, the sun and the totem pole exist, but they have no supernatural or magical powers, nor do they screw around with human lives or cause universes to spring into existence. So what makes me so sure there is no Thor, Zeus, Yahweh, Shiva, etc.? It's really quite simple. We made them up. I think most, if not all, atheists would agree that people throughout the ages made up gods and goddesses to suit their own purposes. Every culture that we know of has invented one or more gods for themselves for a variety of reasons: to explain the inexplicable, to assuage the fear of death, to wield control over others. The need to invent gods is, apparently, a universal psychological and cultural phenomenon. So what we have here in our global pantheon is a long list of fictional characters invented by people who felt they are necessary. The vast majority of these gods, such as Zeus, Thor, and Tlaloc, have long since gone out of fashion and no longer boast any adherents. Let's call these the dead gods. A select few, such as Yahweh, Allah, and Shiva, have survived to the present. Let's call them the living gods. The fact that people still worship the living gods in no way makes them less fictional than the dead gods. People in the past were every bit as devout in their worship of the dead gods as people are today in the worship of the living gods. So, if we as atheists can agree that these are all fictional characters, why do we treat them differently than other fictional characters? For example, you won't hear many atheists say, "While I don't believe in Santa Claus, I can't prove that he doesn't exist, so he just might." The same applies to other fictional characters, from Caliban in Moby Dick to Eric Cartman in Superman.
Whoa, stop right there.
Okay.
Superman exists.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
What makes the fictional characters from literature, cinema, and television easier to dismiss as non-existent, than the fictional characters from the global pantheon? Why should it be easier to flatly deny the existence of Peter Pan than it would be to flatly deny the existence of the god Pan? They are both fictional. Granted, we know who wrote Peter Pan, while we will never know the exact origins of the god Pan. Does Pan's murky origins leave the door open for his divinity? I don't think it should. On the other hand, we don't know exactly who came up with the Arthurian legends.
Just you in the chat room.
On the other hand, we don't know exactly who came up with the Arthurian legends or Beowulf. Are we to conclude that Merlin magician may be a real person simply because we cannot know his exact literary origins? Also, knowing a character's literary origins doesn't necessarily prove that he is fictional. Perhaps Herman Melville based Moby Dick on a white whale with whom he was familiar. I'm not saying he did, but you can't prove he didn't. Which brings us to the question of proof. I agree that it is impossible to prove the non-existence of anything, much less a supernatural being who is determined to remain hidden. But I don't see why that should make atheists uncomfortable, asserting that gods, just like any other fictional characters, don't exist. We don't have any problem asserting that there's no Santa Claus, even though we can't prove it. No one asks us to prove Santa's hoax. I understand that most atheists are sticklers for intellectual honesty. That is why the weak atheist position is so popular. But it seems to me that we weaken our position unnecessarily by shouldering the burden of proof. That burden rightly belongs to the theist. So the central question here is, why are we treating gods, what we normally mean by gods, why are we treating them differently than, say, characters in fiction?
Okay. I got a couple of issues with the way that you structured that.
Okay.
And the main thing is you define what you mean by a god. And you do it in a way that excludes a wide range of things that other people are more than willing to call gods. People with the totem pole. Mm-hmm. You're saying, well, that's not a god, so we can go ahead and have strong atheism because these things that clearly exist that certain people call gods, you're not going to call gods. Right? So it really seems like, if you only want to go as far as saying certain God claims are worth simply rejecting.
That's
right?
what I'm saying.
Certain ones.
Mm-hmm. Most of them.
Then I'd say, yeah. But see, my own personal position is I do argue from the weak atheist position because that's all that I think is necessary. I don't think it's necessary to go so far as to claim knowledge that no such thing as a God can exist. Right? I don't think it's necessary. I think the weak atheist position is actually sort of the opposite of what you were saying. You were saying that adopting the strong atheist position equals the rejection of shouldering the burden of proof. But actually, what you're doing in this essay is you're trying to provide the proof that gods don't exist so that it's been shouldered but dispensed with. See what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
Right? I see it sort of the opposite way, where if you're going to say you know for sure something doesn't exist, you do have to shoulder that burden.
Right,
I understand
that would be a positive claim at that point.
Right.
Right.
So, but what I don't do is I don't take either label and say, I am this kind of atheist with respect to all God definitions.
Uh-huh.
See what I'm saying?
I understand.
And I think that you're absolutely right in your comparison of certain fictional characters that are believed in and certain ones that aren't, right? Mm-hmm. And the only real difference is some people believe in some of them. Sure. And that belief is not proof of anything, and so why not reject them just like all other fictitious characters?
Right.
I think that's absolutely right. But I don't think it's fair to just say the term God doesn't apply to a totem pole that has believers that claim that it's a god, or to a Roman emperor whose people, or Senate said that he was a god, right? They said it was a god.
Uh-huh.
Okay, fine. That exists. then I think that the argument is it doesn't have any magic powers.
Okay.
Russell,
I'd like to say a few things.
Yeah.
First of all, Jeff, I think I kind of disagree with you on the totem pole issue.
Okay.
I'm with Kyle here.
Okay.
I would say that if you're going to call something a god, then using that word god ought to have some actual
it implies
useful
powers.
meaning.
Yeah, it's got some baggage associated with it.
I mean, yeah, there are probably islanders who call their totem pole a god, but implicit in them saying that this totem pole is a god is the assumption that this totem pole has supernatural powers.
Right. It affects the weather. It does other stuff.
And so you would argue...
Does stuff.
And so
I
argue
would say that there's no point in using the word God if you're just going to apply it to, your chair.
Right.
I mean, and I think you'll be hard-pressed to find anyone who claims the existence of a God without assuming as part and parcel of that word God that it does stuff.
Deists.
Right.
Deist God does stuff. I mean, he may not do stuff now, but it creates universe.
It creates the universe and lets it run.
Or at least observes.
So?
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. It does stuff.
But that's not...
it's not like an inanimate object.
Power like if you pray to it, it'll make the rain come. Right? Mm-hmm. That's a thing you can examine statistically. Right? You can watch weather patterns and see whether the prayers of these islanders are actually affecting the weather.
But I think that if you could convince the islanders that they're, somehow, and it would be very difficult to convince them, but if you could convince them that, no, this has no special powers, it's just a hunk of wood, then they would stop calling it a god.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you that when that same goes for the Roman Senate saying that a Roman emperor was a god, right? But
with that definition of a Roman emperor as a god, there is they gave him attributes.
Sure.
He was able to wield all kinds of supernatural forces in battle. He could call the animals down from on high.
Sure, they attributed to him magical powers. And
within that definition of the god, say Augustus, he doesn't exist.
Right. Well, okay, so
is it not possible for their... Hang on a second. These are all good points.
Okay.
It seems to... okay, all right. So you would say that if somebody brings you a totem pole and says, that's my god, you would say, no, that's not a god.
Well,
you would say to that islander, that's not a god because it can't do anything magical. You'd say, what do you mean by God?
Yeah.
Well, what do you do then about the guy who comes and brings you his pet rock and says, here, this is my God?
I would say, find me one of those first before you propose that. You can call anything else. I think there was this anecdote about Abraham Lincoln who he said, if you call a tail a leg, then how many legs does a dog have? And the answer is 4, because calling a tail a leg doesn't make it one. There's got to be some kind of useful definition, and under my definition of God, at least, a hunk of an inanimate object that doesn't do anything doesn't fall under the definition of God. It just doesn't work. But
I don't like the way that this comes down to word games, though. Because
it is a word game when you let somebody say, I think this table is a god, and they don't attribute any supernatural powers. Does it even mean anything? I mean, it's like when people refer to God as good and say, well, he slaughtered all those people, but he's good because he was in the will of God.
Right.
If they do that, if they're allowed to get away with that, then good doesn't mean anything.
Okay.
Anyway, but there's another thing in the essay which I would disagree with.
Okay.
And that is, I would actually be unwilling to say beyond a shadow of a doubt that Santa Claus doesn't exist. I mean, in casual conversations or just talking to a kid who's just found out about Santa Claus, I'd say, yeah, there's no Santa Claus.
But why would you hold the door open for the possibility that he exists?
Well, I would do that because I hold the door open for the possibility of anything.
Right. However,
that seems like a basic requirement of honest, rational thought.
I understand that.
You don't really have the option. But it's not to say. But see, at the same time, right? You say, sure, it could be, but I don't believe that, right? That's not a weak position to take, right? It's not like you're saying there's a good chance that thing exists. You're saying, I'm gonna make my decision on the basis of the available evidence now, right. And if that available evidence changes later, why then, sure, I'll change my mind. That doesn't mean that in that sense, there's not a whole lot of difference between a strong and a weak atheist, except that that seems like the strong atheist is saying not only do such things not exist, but they can't exist.
Right. Whereas,
and that's a trickier position to take.
Right. I guess what I'm getting at here is less of a logical basis for saying that no, these gods cannot exist. I'm saying more along the lines of, oh my gosh, certainly these gods don't exist. We made them up.
Right.
I mean,
I think
we understand the history of making gods up and transitioning from one religion to another. We understand the process. Why should we pretend that? I mean, are we trying to spare somebody's feelings?
We're not trying to spare somebody's feelings. It's actually a principle of scientific thinking. In science, you never say anything is 100%.
Right.
I mean, even really, really obvious things, or things that are really obvious to most people, there is no such thing as 100% certainty. There's always that little window where it would be possible for a new idea to come in and overturn everything.
Right.
I mean, it happens. It's happened all the time throughout history. One of the best known examples would be Einstein with his theory of relativity, basically overturning everything that Isaac Newton came up with as laws of motion. Newton's laws are still a good approximation of how the world works, and we still teach them in introductory physics classes, but eventually we show them, no, even though that's really obvious, and even though that seems like the way it works, Einstein came up with different ideas that change the way we perceive the world works. There can be something, there can be some kind of major event that can overturn something that you think you really know. So it's not just trying to spare people's feelings, it's actually being honest with yourself and thinking, if the stars in the sky spontaneously rearrange themselves to say, read your damn Bible or something like that, that wouldn't be complete proof, but it would be enough to make you take another look and say, hey, there is something going on here.
The certainty is never justified.
Right.
Even with something,
it's only a result of faith.
Right.
Even with something like
wait, what do you mean? What do you
certainty can only be gained through faith.
Absolute certainty.
Absolute certainty can only be gained through faith.
We're in another word game here, right? Because there is a reasonable point at which you can say, okay, no, I am not going to operate from the position that thing, that claim there is true, because I have no good reason to believe it.
Yes, I'm talking absolute certainty.
Right. But then there's the absolute certainty point, which is, no, under no circumstances will I ever believe that thing is true, no matter what happens later. I want to get back to another point, which I think there is one there. I've been agreeing with your comparison between characters in literature that we accept as fiction and characters in literature that happen to be religious literature, and that is that while you can take a particular character from a book and you can say, okay, did this guy actually exist? And you look out in the world for evidence of that particular guy, right? That particular character in a work of fiction, and find out whether he exists or not. I don't think it would be justified to make the claim no characters that appear in works of fiction exist.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not true.
Right.
There are characters that appear in works of fiction.
Based on real people.
Right. Or that literally are fictionalized versions of real people, right? I mean, off the top of my head, Ben and Me, which is about Ben Franklin's intelligent pet mouse.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Great cartoon.
Ben Franklin frickin' existed.
Yeah.
But that's a work of fiction. So you can't make a broad comparison between all works of fiction and all gods and say because all characters in works of fiction don't exist, all characters we call gods don't exist. Because, in fact, some characters in fiction do exist.
Yeah, and I tried to cover that.
Did you?
I tried to. I guess, gosh.
I don't mean to hammer on
no.
but
that's what I came here for.
I mean, you've got some useful insights, but I think that this is one of those points at which we have to sort of tease the two things apart and say, well, really, it's not so much what category they're in. It's like, if the thing is called a god, it doesn't exist, right? If that's analogous to if the character appears in a work of fiction, it doesn't exist, then it doesn't work, right?
Right.
So it really comes down to looking at each one individually. And as soon as you have to look at each one individually, then a broad statement of strong atheism is like a broad statement of no character that appears in any work of fiction exists.
Right. I understand that.
Right? And that can get tricky.
There's one technical thing that bothers me about it. People say you can't prove a negative.
But you can.
But you can.
Yeah.
I mean, I can claim I have a 30-foot long fire-breathing dragon in my garage. Well, it's ridiculous to say that you can't prove that I'm wrong. All I have to do is open the door, look in, no 30-foot fire-breathing dragon. You have proved the negative.
Right. As long as your negative is specific enough and testable. Right. The problem with gods is they tend to be not
They deliberately make them untestable.
And unspecific.
Unspecific.
You know, and they do that more and more in recent times.
Oh, boy,
Because, you know,
people ask for evidence.
Science is going and investigating areas that were traditionally off limits. And so as science goes through and basically falsifies everything that could be falsified, they have to retreat farther and farther and say, okay, well, you know, the dragon's invisible, like Carl Sagan said.
Right, well...
And you can't touch him, and the fire that he breathes has no heat.
Yeah, that wasn't... Yeah, that's what they'd be doing. They'd be adding things to it to make it immaterial, invisible, and all this stuff, so
what
you can never
What you can't prove is an untestable negative.
Right. There could be a McDonald's orbiting Jupiter right now. There's no way I could know whether that's true or not. Yeah.
At the moment, right.
Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense.
But you could say there is no McDonald's next door to Russell's house.
Right.
Right. That
we can just look and see.
Right.
Assuming that it's not an invisible
immaterial McDonald's.
Which I think we're not claiming.
Right.
So there are specific traits of the Christian God that can be tested, and they tend not to support the fact that there's a Christian God.
Right.
And
they make testable claims,
And there are logical disproofs of the Christian God.
Sure.
Such as the problem of evil.
Right.
Right. So I mean, certainly on specific gods, it's absolutely acceptable and appropriate to adopt a strong atheist position with regard to that particular God.
Right.
Right.
That God cannot exist because
and that's what I'm really talking about.
And if we can have, and I have I'm still a little nervous about trying to impose a definition of what a God has to be in order to justify strong atheism in general. But if the person whose God you're talking about agrees with your definition, then I think your argument completely works. Right? If those islanders agree, yes, this totem pole is not in fact a god unless it does the magical things we think it can. Then, once you've dispensed with its ability to do those magical things, then you can turn to them and say, okay, so it's not a god. It exists, but it's not a god.
Right. Well, I mean...
it gets tricky.
I think no unicorns exist. But if somebody comes up to me with their cat and says, here's a unicorn, I am not under any obligation to change the definition of unicorn to accommodate that and say, okay, by this special definition of unicorn.
Except, and here we can play the dictionary game. I'm betting you if you look in a dictionary of sufficient size, you will find multiple definitions for the word God, some of which are going to be acceptable as definitions of things like a totem pole, right? I know that the term God is used all the time as like a euphemism for that which you worship.
Yeah, but just in general, if someone comes up to you and says, do you believe in God? They may not be pointing to a specific numbered definition in the dictionary, but you know that they are referring to a particular kind of God. They're not saying...
But you can answer them. You can answer them even not knowing what God it is by taking the weak atheist position.
Right.
There's nothing called God that I know of that I believe in, so I can give you the answer.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
If you want to get more, specific than that, if you want to get more certain than that, I think you need to get into more specifics about what it is they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Just a quick question. The distinction I made between dead gods and living gods.
Right.
Do you think
threw me a little bit?
Do you think people are more willing to dispense with the dead gods than the living gods? When talking to
I think we've already dispensed with them. That's
right.
pretty much what that distinction is based on, is whether they've been dispensed with or not.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that they provably don't exist. I mean, Douglas Adams, in one of his books, had this great bit where Thor turns out to have been living on Earth all this time, and they realize there's all kinds of problems, like he doesn't have a birth certificate, so he can't apply for anything here in America or something like that.
Yeah.
No, but I think one thing that's really lacking from world history is the story of exactly how those old religions died out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I want to hear about what life was like for the last handful of Zeus believers. It would be really interesting and very informative.
Yes.
I mean, how does that happen? We go around, and most atheists I know go around with this sort of fatalistic attitude of, Christianity, for example, will never go away. Well, we don't know that. Other religions have gone away. Mm-hmm. Why should we assume that? Well, I think
older ones than Christianity, I think, have gone away.
Yeah, and ones that not only were from longer ago, but lasted longer periods of time than this. Right. I think one of the main reasons we have this sort of knee-jerk fatalistic assumption is we just don't know any details about how other religions went away.
True.
It's got to be possible. All right.
Okay.
Well, that's good. I mean, we hammered on you pretty hard, but I mean, there's useful stuff in there. I do like the whole analogy between fictional characters and gods. I think that's very strong, but there are some specific little details that.
Right. It just seems to me that atheists in general have an easier time dismissing fictional characters as fiction, as opposed to the classic definitions of all these gods, the pantheon.
Right.
I can dismiss Darth Vader as fictional, but
I mean, it doesn't make you uncomfortable to do that.
Yeah.
Whereas it might make you a little uncomfortable to say, well, no, there was definitely no Pan, because you can't really prove that.
But again, if somebody pressed me on the issue, are you sure that Darth Vader has never existed? I would say, I'm pretty sure. But I can't prove that there isn't.
So really, you go ahead and treat them all the same.
Yeah.
Right. You're as willing to accept the existence of
I'm willing to say that the
admittedly fictional character.
I'm willing to say that the idea of God is stupid, but that doesn't mean that I couldn't be convinced someday to change my mind.
It has to be that George Lucas channeled an actual Darth Vader character. That would be
or
really
that by
weird.
random chance he just happened to be right.
That's right.
I made something up that happened to exactly describe something else. Or close enough that there's no real doubt about whether it's referring to the same thing. Weird.
Unlikely as that may be.
Let's move on. That was very interesting.
I'd like to read about George Soros soon.
Would you?
People in the chat room are talking about whether there will ever be an atheist president.
All right. Good time for that.
And
Let's
now
do it.
here's a guy who's not even running for president. He's just giving some money to people to try to defeat the current president.
Yeah.
Turns out he's an atheist. Well, I don't know if that was widely known before, but groups are making a big stink about it now.
Is it in fact definitely true? I mean, he says so. Because this is exactly the sort of thing that could be trumped up in order to make it look bad by people that don't like what he's doing.
Let's find out.
Okay.
Conservatives are fuming over the $15.5 million that billionaire financier and philanthropist George Soros has pledged to defeat President Bush. But they're also anxious to fight back and expose what they consider to be Soros's immoral beliefs and atheist leanings. Several prominent conservatives told CNSNews.com that Soros's moral bankruptcy would prove disastrous for the Democratic Party. The liberal groups that have benefited from Soros's gifts, America Coming Together, MoveOn.org, and the Center for American Progress, are run by Democrats and have a close allegiance to the party's candidates. Soros, who emigrated from Hungary in 1956 and later became a naturalized U.S. citizen, has expressed outrage at the Bush administration's foreign policy, especially its decision to invade Iraq. Soros and his foundation, the Open Society Institute, follow a strict philosophy that runs counter to Bush's objectives. Let me find the part about atheism. Conservative
Go ahead.
Conservative commentator Armstrong Williams, an authority on Christian values, said Soros wants to destroy the values on which the United States was founded. Williams called Soros morally bankrupt, and he wants the U.S. Justice Department to investigate his contributions.
What?
He hates God and his biblical principles. He hates everything that's godly, Williams said. He's jumping up and down at the thought that same-sex marriages could happen in this country. It's a direct assault on the church, the institutions that restrain and restrict our behavior and remind us of the standard of morality and moral absolutes.
Wow.
Ironic.
Here's a guy who's not even running for president.
Just because the guy's an atheist.
Right.
Therefore, all the rest of this follows.
Yeah.
No evidence is provided to show that any of those specific claims about his views on things are accurate.
Isn't
You're
this
an
the
atheist,
same kind of
then
stuff?
you are evil.
Isn't this the same kind of stuff they said about blacks how many years ago?
Yeah.
I think it's worse. I mean, blacks were
it's
just,
perfectly okay to slander the crap out of us. And no one goes, hey,
Right. No, somebody does. The National Atheist Ombuds. Ombuds at atheism.org.
Yeah.
This is why that's important, right?
Yeah.
This is a case where there needs to be a response from the atheist community to these statements.
Substitute black for atheist in there. We want to expose his black. What? Who cares?
He's undermining the white values.
He's undermining the right values, right? What?
They've acknowledged that Soros is a secularist.
Fucking bigot.
Yeah. Who has acknowledged?
Well, Vachon, and I was looking further back, but trying
the people taking his money? Or him?
Can't find it.
Oh.
But somebody associated with
it doesn't matter, whether he is or not.
That he is a secularist, and he also said the billionaire could handle the attacks from conservatives. But Vachon said Soros' concerns extend beyond Bush. He believes the concept of an open society in the United States is threatened. He's giving money to a group that wants to see the incumbent Republican president defeated in the next election, he said. A lot of people are going to attack him, and he's hardly surprised by it.
Right.
He's no baby.
Right. But you're absolutely right, Dennis. We are, it's like us.
We're the victims of
last acceptable
people groups that you can slander in this country without people automatically looking askance upon you. Sick.
I wonder if that'll change soon.
Maybe we could eventually start our own atheist universities.
Oh, great.
To promote our evil values.
No, I think that would be bad.
Well, I mean, we do have a nation that is... the reins of power in our nation are often grasped by the majority viewpoint, which is Christianity, and used to make theirs appear to be the only acceptable viewpoint.
Right.
As is the case with this obligatory recitation of the Ten Commandments that was going on in California, which prompted Michael Newdow's lawsuit.
Pledge of Allegiance.
Right.
Should I say?
Ten Commandments.
Not yet do kids have to stand up and say that we have no other gods before me.
That would be something.
Off my stride today. Pledge of Allegiance. And a lawsuit which is now on its way to the Supreme Court. The American Center for Law and Justice, the ACLJ, it was apparently important to them to have roughly the same initials as the ACLU.
It's like the version with the goatee, the evil version.
And Amanda pointed out to me that the initials for ACLU also spell a clue. Whereas ACLJ spells out a kludge.
And in fact, that is exactly what it is.
Yes.
A public interest law
ironic.
firm.
Beautiful.
It is.
The American Center for Law and Justice, a public interest law firm specializing in slapping Christianity all over everything, today filed an amicus brief. I'm paraphrasing.
Yes, I understand.
Today filed an amicus brief with the U.S. Supreme Court on behalf of nearly 70 members of Congress and more than 2,600 Americans, asking the High Court to overturn the decision of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit, declaring the Pledge of Allegiance unconstitutional because of the words "under God." Now, already, this news report about their amicus brief has jumped the rails because the U.S. Circuit...
Sure it hasn't jumped the shark?
The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit never declared that the Pledge of Allegiance was unconstitutional because of the words.
Right.
They said that mandatory recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance by students in public schools is unconstitutional because of the words.
Right.
But you'll never hear them say that.
No, in fact, here is Jay Sekulow himself, once again, the man with the most ironic name in the universe, explaining the viewpoint of the ACLJ. The voluntary recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance is not a coerced religious act. You're right. Voluntary automatically means not coerced.
Right.
Except that the case at hand here, right, the thing actually that actually caused the lawsuit was coerced because it wasn't voluntary.
It was mandatory.
But merely reflects the historical fact that this nation was founded upon a belief in God. No. Excuse me, not true. Founded by people who largely believed in gods of various kinds, including largely the deistic God that's not the Christian God. So it's not the God referred to by Christians like him. And the nation itself was not founded upon the belief of God.
No.
There were references to God by believers who were founding this nation upon the belief that we shouldn't frickin' have to bend over and take it up the butt from England. That was the principle on which this nation was founded. The recitation of the pledge in public schools does not violate the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment and is part of an American tapestry of patriotic and historical references that date back to the founding of our nation. Once again, it's not just the recitation that's the issue. It's the
coercion.
Obligatory recitation of the pledge when it requires that the little boy say that the nation that he is allied with is, the lapdog of this particular deity. We are hopeful the High Court will reject the flawed legal reasoning of the appeals court and uphold the constitutionality of the pledge, including the words "under God."
They want their cake and eat it too.
Well, I mean, there is some clearly flawed reasoning going on here. Or rather, there is a clear attempt to dodge the actual issues by pretending that this case is about something it's not. Mm-hmm. And, that's the flawed legal reasoning here. The ACLJ today filed a friend of the court brief on behalf of 68 members of Congress and more than 260,300 Americans, including school-aged children, many of whom attend public schools and desire to recite the pledge. Well, you know what? People that desire to recite the pledge have nothing to fear.
They're free to recite it.
With or without those extra words, because this isn't about freely reciting the pledge. They can do it whenever the hell they want.
Yeah, let them sit around and say, one nation founded by Christians for Christians only.
They can say that, as long as they're not being disruptive, right, and they don't interfere with the normal course of events of the school. The brief contends that Michael Newdow, the California atheist who brought suit challenging the pledge, does not have legal standing to challenge the pledge because he was a non-custodial parent with no decision-making authority over his daughter's education. Well, so what?
Yeah, screw the point.
Yeah.
Right.
So what? I mean, that's that. If they really think that this is a direct attack on the freedom of little children to say whatever the hell they want, then they should know they're automatically going to win in front of the Supreme Court because, duh, that's bogus. But it's not about that.
Right.
The only reason to bring up this whole nonsense about Michael Newdow and his relationship with his, former sex partner and mother of his daughter is that they're looking for ways of heading this case off at the pass and preventing it from even getting to the Supreme Court. Further, the brief provides detailed historical references of how our founding fathers wanted to acknowledge our nation's religious heritage.
Wait, so are you saying Jay Sekulow doesn't want it to go to the Supreme Court?
He does not want it to go to the Supreme Court.
Huh, that's interesting.
Why?
I heard him talking a while ago, and he really, really wanted it to go to the Supreme Court to be overturned.
Then what is the point of this whole argument that Michael Newdow doesn't have standing? If his side really, really wants to go to the Supreme Court...
it'll get overturned before going to the Supreme Court.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
And they're free not to raise that issue and not to make a stink about that issue if they really want this case to go to the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
My guess is they don't. So further it says they have detailed historical references of how our founding fathers wanted to acknowledge our nation's religious heritage. Well,
if they wanted to, they could have.
I don't have any problem with acknowledging our nation's religious heritage. Our nation does have a religious heritage, but that's different from saying that Christianity has to be, that Christianity is the core of our legal system, or that belief in God is a requirement for properly being allied with our nation, or any of the other things that these guys are trying to say. Sure, yeah, we have a lot of Christians. And what does that have to do with anything? The brief also argues that every member of the Supreme Court that has addressed the constitutionality of patriotic exercises with religious references, including the pledge, has concluded that those references are constitutional acknowledgments of our nation's religious heritage, which is not true.
Right.
In fact, in cases like the attempt to get In God We Trust off our money, if that went to the Supreme Court, does anybody know, did that actually get as far as the Supreme Court? I thought it did.
The Supreme Court said
that under God didn't mean, or that In God We Trust didn't mean anything, right? That it was merely...
I couldn't tell you for sure.
I think so, but perhaps not. But that is an example of a case where a challenge to the inclusion of religious language in government things was allowed to stand, but in every case, the argument has not been, it's okay because it acknowledges our nation's religious heritage. It's been, it's okay because it doesn't mean anything, because it's purely ceremonial.
Right.
Which is a bad reason for leaving it in my opinion.
Why not take it out?
When you have a ceremonial thing that happens to favor a particular religion in your nation, or a particular viewpoint about religion in your nation, exactly the sort of thing that the government's not supposed to do, you ought to take out that ceremonial language for that reason. But here he is lying that their justification was, if it acknowledges our religious heritage, it's okay. The words of the pledge echo the conviction held by the founders of this nation that our freedoms come from God. You know, they may... that's, I assume he's referring to Declaration of Independence, right?
But a lot of these
inalienable rights kind of thing.
A lot of these guys base their beliefs on rights, on the works of Locke and Hobbes, and not the Bible, not
right.
So is he saying that when the pledge was originally written, it didn't reflect that?
Apparently, that is what he's saying.
Wow.
But then, and of course, he's once again dodging the issue that a lot of our founding fathers, some of the ones most concerned with freedom issues, were deists and not Christians. That wasn't the same God. The brief states, Congress inserted the phrase, one nation under God, in the Pledge of Allegiance for the express purpose of reaffirming America's unique standing of this truth and to distinguish America from atheistic nations who recognize no higher authority than the state. You know, speaking as an atheist, if I was in an atheistic nation, I'd still recognize a higher authority than the state, and that higher authority would be reason.
Right.
If the state does stuff that doesn't make sense,
conscience,
then the state is wrong and needs to be corrected. But once again, I mean, they're dodging the issue that it was put in the Pledge of Allegiance specifically as a slap in the face of Russia.
Commish.
Well, they did at the time. I mean,
he refers to it as America's unique understanding of this truth, as if he was speaking truth.
Right.
That was the thing that was being recognized, when in fact he's making it up. Good grief! And plus, you know, the Constitution forbids it in the first place. So what if the Congress wanted to express their understanding of that truth? Doesn't matter. If it's unconstitutional, they shouldn't have done it, and it should be taken out. The brief contends that if the pledge is held unconstitutional, it will have a chilling effect in public schools regarding the teaching of historical documents like the Declaration of Independence, the Mayflower Compact, and the Gettysburg Address.
Oh, brother.
As well as putting at risk the performance of choral music that includes religious references. The brief argues that if the appeals court decision stands, it, quote, will threaten a sort of Orwellian reformation of public school curricula by censoring American history and excluding much that is valuable in the world of music.
Oh, Pete's
right. No,
wow, slippery slope much? No, dude. There's the Declaration of Independence first of all, came into existence before the frickin' Constitution.
Yeah. It doesn't define our laws anyway.
It doesn't define our laws, and it can't be held to be in violation of the Constitution because the Constitution doesn't have any authority over it. It's like saying the Magna Carta would have to be modified because of this. You know, no. You apply the Constitution to things the Constitution has jurisdiction over, and it doesn't have a jurisdiction over things that came before it, like the Declaration of Independence and the Mayflower Compact, by the way. The Gettysburg Address, on the other hand, does have God language, and did happen after the Constitution, and I do shake my finger at Abraham Lincoln for including religious language in a government sponsored address. But on the other hand, it's done. And it's like saying we can certainly have copies of the modified Declaration of Independence in our history books. Here, in this interesting period between about 1950 and 2000, we had our little children being forced to say that they believed in a God. What an interesting historical curiosity. Now, then you move on to what happened in 2004.
And let that be a lesson to you.
There's nothing wrong with that. It's only that you can't take the kids and make them stand there and say they believe in a God when you are the government.
Yeah. Right.
What a complete load of horse shit.
Yep.
Wow.
I've got a few things to interject from the chat room.
I don't have an actual copy of their amicus brief. I'm going to look it up, and if there's more interesting tidbits in there, I'll mention them on the next show. Yes, Russell.
Well, first of all, they were trying to come up with something to replace the word God in there, and my favorite one came from Jake something. He said, "One nation undereducated."
Oh.
Ow.
Yep.
Well, yeah.
And Well, Think Fast said then they started talking about ceremonial deism, and Think Fast said, why ceremonial deism? Would we tolerate ceremonial racism, for example? No, Mr. Supreme Court Justice, we don't really think you're a nigger, but that's what our forefathers would have said.
Oh! That is an extremely good point.
That's excellent.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Yep. Wow. Huh. Excellent insight.
Neutron Jack was the undereducated one.
Excellent insight.
The one who
Neutron
suggested
Jack.
that.
Wow.
Not Jake anybody.
Sorry.
Neutron Jack.
Neutron Jack.
Okay. Do we have some follow-ups on the whole church-state separation issue?
Yeah. I have a story here out of Channelview, Texas.
Uh-huh.
The headline here is, "Did teacher lead lessons in witchcraft?" And then a little quote. "Well, they shouldn't teach witchcraft. That's a religion."
Now I can tell by your accent what sort of person it was who made that incredibly ironic comment.
Right.
Go on with the story.
Okay. Did a teacher go too far by giving lessons in witchcraft? What got one parent's attention was the book that came home 2 weeks ago in her son's front pocket. Must have been a small book. It was a book that explores the Wicca faith, known to many as witchcraft. Quote, "I took it away from him as soon as he came in the door. I said, 'Where did you get this book?' He said, 'Mom, I can't tell you because it will get somebody in trouble.'" Allegedly, the book was a teaching tool in an after-school series of study sessions taught by a teacher at Alice Johnson Middle School. Parents say a group of 6 students met twice a week for the past several weeks. This mom thought her child was in the school-sponsored tutorials at that time. She says instead he was studying the book on Wicca. Quote, "For someone to put this bad seed into my child's thoughts and try to cloud the goodness that is in his mind is really what bothers me."
The hell?
So it's bad seed if it's Wicca, but if it's Christianity, it's good seed.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. That's what really bothers me.
Too much bias there.
And it's not just
I think they're both completely freaking stupid.
They're trying to turn my son into a...
But apparently this is an after-school activity.
But understanding religions, that objective is a good thing.
Sure.
Everybody should have some basic background in all religious viewpoints.
Yeah, but
everybody should have some.
The question is, was she specifically promoting Wiccanism?
We don't know.
Or
it never really says.
Just like, doing the humanities class thing where, here's what a whole bunch of people believe.
Right.
And this is after school, on the kid's own time and the teacher's own time. I don't know if she's allowed to do that after school with the kids or not. It doesn't say.
I don't know. I mean, I was saying before the show, I think you're allowed to have like a Bible study group after school, but not be led by a teacher. Is that right?
If the school allows any organizations to come in and use their space after hours, then they have to allow all organizations to do that.
Yeah.
And it's not just her. Apparently, C.M. Kelly is the pastor of the Baptist church right across the street from the school. Quote,
"Oh, really?
Will they let me come and teach Christianity? No, they won't," he says. "Well, they shouldn't teach witchcraft. That's a religion."
Presumably, if this course really was like a comparative understanding religions thing, then the kids did get taught something about Christianity.
Samantha,
it's just that the mom would not have flipped out if the kid had brought a little Bible home in his pocket, unless it was an atheist mom.
This is my stepdaughter Samantha. She's in junior high.
Yeah.
What were you saying?
Okay. From old school, we had this thing called Unlimited, which was a Bible study-like thing on Wednesdays.
Unlimited?
Yeah.
During school,
Yeah, during school.
During school.
For lunch, and it's this group of kids that just go and like do little Bible studies and stuff, but the teacher would not lead it, but the teacher was there supervising. And
a lot of places you have to have a teacher, like sponsor or supervisor or something in order to have a group at all.
And they like order pizza and stuff, and all the kids would go and
and this was during lunch? I see.
Well, as long as they allow,
like something,
as long as they would equally allow some other group of kids to get together and say, we want to study, Ayn Rand or Satanism or anything else that they felt like studying during that time period, and have a teacher, watching them. As long as they allow all that stuff, then that's okay. We don't know.
Huh.
Were there other groups that were doing similar things?
Mm-mm.
You ever try to set one up?
No.
See, I'm telling you, you're just not using your free speech. We talked about this before. Interesting.
No.
The fact is, you have to go to the principal and ask permission to start the group.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Right.
It's up to him or her.
Right.
I see. Well, just tag into the story. The mother was told the teacher has been suspended, but she wonders how she can be sure.
She has no trouble being sure of the existence of an invisible man in the sky who watches over her every action. I think that she could probably find sufficient justification for accepting the school's relatively mundane claim that they fired somebody.
Yeah, or suspended her.
Suspended, whatever.
Yeah.
Suspended is not fired.
Wow.
Technically, no. Alrighty. Set your irony meters at low sensitivity for this next story, folks. The U.S. issued a new report on international religious freedoms.
Oh, yeah?
This is not including religious freedom issues here in the U.S.
Right. What did they find?
Now, our State Department, for whom it is not their business to tell other countries how to operate their religious freedom issues, because they're in our country, right? We have no grounds for imposing our views on other nations. A State Department report released Thursday, I guess that was this last Thursday, said Saudi Arabia continues to impose strict limitations on religious freedoms. It also criticized Israel and several European allies for varying degrees of religious intolerance.
Criticize them?
Yeah. Varying degrees of religious intolerance.
Gee.
The report said, now
Wow.
some of this is, useful information.
Yeah,
I don't mind knowing what is going on in these other nations. It just seems hypocritical and ironic for the United States to set itself up as the arbiter of religious freedom issues. The report said the Chinese government permitted free religious expression only to organizations approved by the authorities. One notes that the guy managing this faith-based funding is on record saying that non-Christian groups ain't getting any. Members of some unregistered religious groups were subject to restrictions, such as, in our country, not getting federal funding for their social programs, leading in some cases to intimidation, harassment, and detentions. Yeah, we don't have atheists intimidated or harassed here at all. The findings were included in the State Department's 5th annual International Freedom Report. God, isn't this the UN's territory and not America's? It's not our fucking business.
Right. I think it goes along with a PR initiative of the State Department to show the rest of the world how tolerant and non-anti-Muslim we are. You know what I'm saying? They've been doing this, I guess, since September 11th. Trying to convince the rest of the world.
It's been 5 years.
Oh, okay.
We've been doing it longer than that.
Okay.
Much of the world's population lives in countries in which the right of religious freedom is restricted or prohibited. Like here in the U.S., where little kids have to say that they believe in a God when they take the Pledge of Allegiance. Millions of persons live in totalitarian or authoritative regimes determined to control religious beliefs and practice, it said. Like here in the U.S., where we have Ten Commandments monuments on our courthouse lawns. In Saudi Arabia, the report said, freedom of religion does not exist. It said the government continued to enforce a strictly conservative version of Sunni Islam and suppress the public practice of other interpretations of Islam and non-Muslim religions. Well,
Meanwhile,
we're not quite as bad as them.
People are no longer allowed to wear headscarves.
They might get to France in this. Remember, that's not the United Nations and therefore fair game. Or not the United States and therefore fair game.
Mm-hmm.
Pakistan, another friendly Islamic country, failed in many respects to protect the rights of religious minorities, the U.S. Report said. It added that the government tolerates societal forces hostile to those who practice a different faith. Yeah. Doesn't our government tolerate societal forces hostile to those who practice different faiths? I don't see us rounding up fundamentalists. You know, guys going on record saying, if you're not one of us, you're evil. I don't see that happening. As I recall, this all started in response to Christian groups in the U.S. bitching that they weren't allowed to go into some of these other countries and freely turn citizens of those other countries into Christians. Mm-hmm. That's what this is really all about.
Yes.
In North Korea, the study said there were reports of executions, torture, and imprisonment for religious persons. We're not that bad so far. In Turkmenistan, persons practicing any faith other than Sunni Islam or Russian Orthodox Christianity risked detention, arrest, or confiscation of religious literature and materials. We're not that bad.
Well, the kid had his Wicca book taken. But...
Presumably,
his mom has every right to do that.
Yes, mom.
I know.
Israel was listed among countries with policies that disadvantage certain religions. The country's legal system protects against religious discrimination, but some non-Jews encountered bias in the areas of education, housing, employment, and social services. Don't atheists encounter some bias in the areas of education, housing, employment, and social services here in the U.S., particularly in as much as the government is trying to give, $400,000 or whatever the amount is. $200 million? Some huge amount is trying to force through the faith-based social channels. Mm-hmm. It noted that Arab schools in Israel receive significantly fewer resources than comparable Jewish schools. We're not really like that in the sense of the way we manage our private religious schools. Belgium, France, and Germany were said to stigmatize certain religions. We stigmatize certain religions in this country, do we not? Mm-hmm. So we lose on that point, too.
We just talked about about people threatening to have their atheism exposed, that's...
And wouldn't that guy saying that they want that fellow investigated for being an atheist?
Yeah.
What the hell? Isn't his existence being tolerated by our government? In Belgium, the report noted that some of these I think are fine. I want us to tolerate even aggressively vicious and intolerant religions. I want us to tolerate them. But in this report, they go after other countries for not tolerating them. In Belgium, the report noted that the Helsinki Foundation, a Federation for Human Rights, asserted that Belgium had not taken any effective measures to counteract the hostility of discrimination suffered by groups depicted as sects. I don't see any effective measures being taken to protect atheists in this country. In France, the study noted that the Council of Europe has invited France to reconsider the About Picard law, which tightens restrictions on associations and provides for the dissolution of groups, including religious groups, under certain conditions. I know a little bit about that law, and that's actually a good law. The report is because it goes after groups not because of their beliefs, but because of their tactics. In Germany, federal authorities continue to monitor the Church of Scientology, although the church and its members have not been found to be involved in any criminal activity during the last 6 years of observation. Well, at least they're being observed there. Okay, so we're running down on time here. I just want one last little, story for the holidays. In this season of gift giving, woman faces charge for selling sex toys. Cleburne, Texas. Joan Webb intended to spice up marriages and earn extra cash by selling erotic toys. Instead, the former fifth-grade teacher and executive board member of the Burleson Chamber of Commerce faces criminal charges and embarrassment after a police sting. It's ludicrous to think that the government can step into our bedrooms, said Webb, who's been married 20 years and has 3 children. Webb was one of 3,000 consultants for Passion Parties, a San Francisco-based company whose representatives set up Tupperware-type parties for women who feel more comfortable buying marital aids in the privacy of their own homes.
Oh, it's a sex toy MLM.
Cool. Yeah, so, there we go. Happy holidays, everyone.
Oh, and
have a wonderful solstice.
I hear that Saddam Hussein was captured or something.
Yay! We got a guy who had nothing to do with 9/11. Yay for us. We will see you in 2 weeks. Hang in there during this time of religious oppression and watch your backs.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye.